All right, it's that time of the week, my friends. Thursday Night Football is back, which means it's week 8 of the fantasy football season, here to give you guys some start, sit, sleeper, waiver wire pickups for the weekend. It's our buddy Jeff Pasquino from the footballguys.com helping you set your week 8 fantasy football lineup. Welcome back, Jeff. What's going on, my man?
Always good to be back, Mike. Can't wait for some more action tonight.
Yeah, man, and not the best game tonight. You got Texans in Miami, but there are some interesting fantasy guys in this one. Houston's won 4 in a row. Miami is very up and down on the fantasy scene. So give us a couple guys tonight that should be in our listeners' lineup.
Yeah, so you got to start with the Texans. You know, the home team usually is your favorite on the home night, and they're favored by 7 tonight. So I think you're looking at Deshaun Watson and you definitely got Nuke at wide receiver. DeAndre Hopkins, he's the top 5 wide receiver this week. But as far as Miami, there's a little bit on the running backs. They kind of split their work. Drake, it's kind of a thin week this week with the bye still going on. But one guy to consider picking up if you need a wide receiver is Danny Amendola. He's getting a lot of targets from Miami. He's probably going to get the start. He's a solid wide receiver 3 with some upside.
Jeff, quarterback play, you know, I'm in a situation where I have both Mahomes and Breeze, so I'm always in that situation where I got to pick a guy every single week. But there's a lot of great quarterback starts out there. How about Kirk Cousins this week in Minnesota? He's got 2 great targets, but does that make him a great quarterback?
He does, and I think that's a solid top 5 pick this week. Again, Minnesota, New Orleans, that's sort of a revenge game for the playoffs last season. That fabulous ending in the playoffs last year. So I think Kirk Cousins is the top 5 wide receiver quarterback. Plenty of wide receiver options for him. And with Dalvin Cook out again, probably out till week 11, I think they're going to be relying on the passing game for Minnesota.
Jeff, let's go to Andy Dalton. He had a tough night the other night against Kansas City. He's got the Bucs this week. That defense is pretty bad. So should we trust Andy Dalton this week?
Well, it's always hard to trust Andy Dalton, but he looks to be a top 12 quarterback this week. Tampa Bay defense cures a lot of woes here. I think Dalton's going to get at least 2 touchdowns and probably 250 yards passing.
What about Andrew Luck? He's been a guy, I mean, if you had him a couple of years ago, I had him and led me to a championship. He was a fantasy stud. He's kind of in irrelevancy almost right now, but maybe not on the fantasy scene?
Yeah, it's a surprising stat. You know, I keep pace with the league, obviously, every week, but I was even surprised before Mahomes played last week. Andrew Luck was leading the top quarterback in touchdown passes with 21. Very quietly this year, he's doing a very solid fantasy numbers. Again, the Colts don't have much of a ground game.
How about our buddy Carson Wentz? I mean, the numbers are great. He's going to to London to face Jacksonville, who, you know, came into this year with a really good defense. So is Carson Wentz a strong fantasy play this week?
I think he's more of a quarterback, too, this week. Jacksonville's defense is still a top option for them. They have good corners. The Eagles aren't the best the offense is not scoring a lot except for the one Giants game. I think and it's a slow track at Wembley. So I think that's Philadelphia and their offense keeps Wentz at a QB2 this week.
A couple more quarterbacks for Jeff. We'll get to the running back plays. Russell Wilson had the bye last week. He's got the Lions this week. You know, Wilson's kind of been quiet as typically out in the Pacific Northwest, but is he a strong fantasy play?
I think he's a solid quarterback, too, again, this week. Again, you've got a team coming off a bye. Seattle's trying to get their ground game going with Mike Davis and Chris Carson. So I think that the Seattle's more of a balanced offense, and they don't have a lot of options at you know, Jimmy Graham's no longer there. It's more of a T.J. Lockett and not much else. So I think you're leaning towards QB2 status for Russell Wilson this week.
Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com. Week 8 fantasy football running backs. All right. How about Denver with Philip Lindsay? We talk a lot about him. They got the Chiefs this week. Is this a week where him and Freeman have kind of been splitting a lot, but could Lindsay shine this week?
I think it's more of a Lindsay week because you're looking for a team that's probably going to be trailing. Lindsay's more of a receiver. I think Freeman's more of a goal line back where you're not going to have too many opportunities. Kansas City has really improved their defense, especially on 3rd down. But Lindsay, especially in PPR leagues, is going to be a running back too this week.
How about let's go to Adrian Peterson. I like Peterson as a regular football player. What about a fantasy football player this week? Snack Harrison out in the New York for the Giants. Is this a good play for the 33-year-old Adrian Peterson?
Again, like in previous weeks with the bye weeks involved, the line is lower for running back 1 and running back 2. Adrian Peterson's right in that line between the two. He's a solid starter. as a running back 2 with some upside. The Giants are going to be a weak defense. Washington's favored in that game. But also keep in mind that in PPR leagues, if you're looking for a guy to grab, Capri Bibbs scored a touchdown last week, and Chris Thompson could be out again. Bibbs is a solid waiver pickup, especially in PPR leagues for the Redskins.
Saw a trade last week. Does that mean that Nick Chubb is on the radar this week with Cleveland?
I think he is. Cleveland, they started to work him in. He finally got a touchdown late in that game last week, which made a lot of fantasy owners happy, and I think he's a solid running back, too, again this week. Probably the lead back for Cleveland against Pittsburgh.
And then Carlos Hyde was the guy who got traded out. He's going to face the Eagles. Is Hyde in on your fantasy roster?
I think he is. I think it's a tough job to move to another team, but when you're getting the ball and finding the hole, I think it pretty much the recipe is there no matter what team you're on. So I think that he's a solid running back too, with definitely upside over across the pond this week.
Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com. Week 8 wide receivers. Let's go to John Brown. Big week last week. He's got the Panthers this week. So is John Brown a guy you're in on?
I think he's a solid option this week. I think that Carolina defense is doing pretty well. They held the Eagles in check for 17 points before that terrible letdown in the fourth quarter. Carolina's an underrated defense, and it's going to be a tight, tough game. I think that John Brown is a solid wide receiver 3 with some upside this week.
How about a guy like Demaryius Thomas? We haven't heard a lot of him. His name's been brought up in trade. So is this the week that Denver maybe wants to target him to up his value?
I think so. I think that they've been targeting Emmanuel Sanders a ton, both not just as a receiver but also as a rusher, and even he threw an option pass. So he's getting the bulk of the work. There also one guy to keep in mind is Cortland Sutton. He's probably the heir apparent if Demaryius Thomas moves on. So I would definitely consider grabbing him if you think Thomas is going to be traded. But Thomas is a wide receiver, too, against Kansas City, and could potentially be the highest scoring game of the week.
Yeah, a lot of times, everybody knows to play the big guys, the big top names out there. It's the medium, mid-level guys we like to talk about here. What about Tyler Boyd? Everybody knows A.J. Green. We talked about Andy Dalton, but is Boyd a guy that's got to start getting some more consistent play?
I think he does, and it really comes back to Andy Dalton and the targets, because the wide receivers are completely dependent, not just the offensive line, but also the quarterback play. And also John Ross has been out for a while. But I think Boyd is a solid option. Cincinnati, they may be – against Tampa Bay, you're going to be seeing all phases of the offense moving the ball. So I think that I think Boyd is a solid wide receiver 3 this week.
We'll get a couple questions in for Jeff coming up here in a minute. A couple more wide receivers. Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com. We talk about top guys and those names. We like to give the mid-level guy because people are torn on. But Josh Gordon, I don't know if he's thought of as a top guy, a mid-level guy. Where are you putting Josh Gordon at this stage of his Patriots career?
I think he's a wide receiver 3 with upside just because the targets aren't consistently there. He got more targets last week, but Gronkowski was out. So this is another tough week for him because Patriots are favored by 2 touchdowns against Buffalo, so they may just be running the ball a lot in the second half, which will, again, lower the upside for Josh Gordon. Gordon could see 4 or 5 targets and may break one deep and find the end zone, but that's kind of a wide receiver 3 with upside type play.
All right, we'll get Jeff's plays here in just a minute. Got a couple of questions we want to get to from the listeners out there. Kittle or Burton at the tight end spot?
I like Trey Burton because I think that Trubisky's really coming of age. I think that both the guys you mentioned are top 5 options, but for me, it's Trey Burton in PPR leagues. But for touchdown upside, I like Kittle a little more against Arizona.
All right, Hogan or Boyd at wide receiver?
I think I like Boyd because he's getting more and more into the offense. Hogan is more of a wide receiver 3 on the team. But if you think that Josh Gordon is getting more work, which he is, then it's going to push down Hogan's value.
How about Aaron Jones or Nick Chubb at running back?
Well, Green Bay's going against the Rams, so that's a tough one. So I think I'd go with Nick Chubb in that case.
All right, Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com. We'll run out of time here. So, Jeff, let's get a couple of guys that you like, some sleepers, some waiver wire guys, and guys that should be in lineups this week.
Well, I mentioned Capri Bibbs earlier at running back, but there's 2 other guys at running back I like to pick up. Ronald Jones, the second for Tampa Bay, is getting a lot more work in practice. He's a rookie with upside. This is about the time of year you see teams that are more out of it turn towards the rookie. So Ronald Jones is a good pickup. I also like looking at the Oakland situation because Marshawn Lynch just went on IR. So Jalen Richard is the top of my list, not Doug Martin. I think that Jalen Richard is going to get much more work and is a borderline running back 2 this week with some upside. Wide receiver, I mentioned Danny Amendola earlier, but I think you got to look at, again, what's going on in Oakland with a trade of Amari Cooper to the Cowboys. Martavis Bryant is probably going to start, but I think Seth Roberts will get a lot of work out of the slot. I mentioned Courtney Sutton for Denver. Traquan Smith for the Saints is getting a lot of action and targets more and more over Meredith for the Saints, so I think Smith is a good pickup. Jakeem Grant is also a guy you might want to play tonight for Miami. He's more of a wide receiver 4, but he gives you some upside if you have a lot of guys in the bye. Jakeem Grant is going to see plenty of targets for the Dolphins. And one last option or two, one for tonight, one for a little bit on Sunday. Tight end is a tough spot all year. Mike Gesicki for Miami is a rookie tight end. He's getting more and more targets in that offense and they're banged up at wide receiver. And C.J. Uzomah for Cincinnati is also getting plenty of work for the Bengals.
All right, there you go. Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com. It's week 8 in the fantasy football season, halfway home. Make sure you get your guys in, and if you have the buys this week, get them out. It starts tonight, and Jeff Pasquino from the footballguys.com answers your fantasy football questions. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Mike. Enjoy the games.